This is Pharlight from Native Instruments. Pharlight is a Kontakt instrument focusing on vocal manipulation with a granular synthesis. I had a chance to both make presets for this and also a demo track for this. And if you want to, you can remix my demo track for a chance to win some really awesome prizes from Native Instruments. So, first we're going to listen to some sounds, then we're going to make some sounds, and then we're going to talk about the contest. Let's go. This is the last sound we're going to listen to before we get into how Pharlight works. This is one of my presets called Sky Piano, and it uses a grand piano sample that's available in the sample slot on the right of the interface, and a really cool abstract sample for the grain on the left, and a bunch of effects to compress it and add reverb and modulation, and I just love it to death. Okay, so now that you've heard a little bit of what Pharlight can do, let's talk about how Pharlight do it. The thing. Let's learn how Pharlight works. Pharlight has two panels where you can add samples, the grain panel and the sample panel. We're going to focus on the grain panel first by turning down the sample panel, sample output, so we can just listen to the grain. There are a ton of samples to use in the grain section. And you can load your own up if you want to. Granular synthesis works by playing back little pieces of a sample, and it gives you control over the interval, either timed or non-timed, and then the size of each grain. So you can go from gated pads to big pads, depending on how these settings are set, which is really cool. Down here, you can fade the grain in and out. So depending on what interval size you're using, this will give you different results. In this section, you have control over where the cursor hits and whether or not multiple grains will be passing along at the same time or just one. You can also change how much it scans from left to right. And mapping this to aftertouch is really, really cool. So I just hit bounced edge, which is going to bounce that cursor left and right. And I can also change the range at which the grains scan through with those two controls. Jitter will control how much the cursor jumps around as it travels through the sample. Over here, we have amp controls like volume, pretty standard, and a really cool pan jitter, which will jitter the pan for each grain. Gives you instant, interesting stereo. And then we have an envelope, a standard ADSR. So you can get everything from pads to leads to whatever this is. Sound design is really fun on Pharlight, especially of the cinematic nature. If you click this little dice thing, it's going to randomize the settings. And not all of the iterations are useful, but it's a really interesting way to get drunk B sounds. Or this. Or this, which is actually really cool. Oh wait, there's the drunk B sound. No idea what's going on right now. In the sample section, you have a whole bunch of samples you can choose from as well. So let's turn that up and listen to what's going on here. So standard pitch controls over on the left, which you're not going to hear a change of unless I hit the note again, which is a little weird, but you have a ton of different samples to choose from in the sample slot, including this awesome whispering sound. Also user samples. So we'll turn this down a little bit, turn up our main grain, and build a weird soundscape. There's a filter on the sample thing, which is really useful, and there are a ton of filter types. Wow, that is tickly as hell. You also have a ADSR filter envelope and an ADSR amp. Let's talk about effects next. There are send effects, and then an effect engine for both the grain and the sample. Let's mess with the send effects first. You can send it to a delay. Go ahead and turn it on. And there are a bunch of delay types. Some of these are from other Native Instruments products like Replica. The cloud pan down here is really cool. Go ahead and turn up a send. You can hear that diffusion. Instant soundscape. It's awesome. Turn up our sample. And now let's assign the sample to a reverb. There are a bunch of really cool reverb types here, but when you choose one, then you get access to all of these. And some of them are really wild, like these reverse ones. So let's go ahead and listen to what that sounds like. Oh my god, I love it so much. Here it is on that grand piano sample. It is so cool. Let's put these together. Some grain to the reverse. That's just wild. So those send effects happen before this effects section, and there are 4 effect slots for each the grain and the sample. And there are a whole bunch to choose from. We'll look into those in a second. There's also a master effects section up here where you have 4 more slots to process both the grain and the sample together. So let's take a listen to some of these. We have a filter section with all of those filter modes that were available in the sample section. And all of this is modulatable as well. All those different filter modes are there. So if I want to, let's say, modulate this cutoff with the XY pad, I can assign it there by clicking on the X and then turn up the amount. And now the X axis will modulate that. Anything can be assigned in this way. Next up is the EQ, a standard 3-band and 1-band EQ. Useful. Then we have dynamics with a bunch of different options there. Some really good stuff. And then the gator, which is really cool. So we can draw a pattern in here, and it will start to gate. We can also choose the subdivision of the pattern itself. So I'm going to choose 32, so we get like 16th note gates. There are 2 sequences, and you can morph between them using modulation or something like the assignable XY pad, which is really, really, really cool. Next up is the drive section with a bunch of different options. This lo-fi one can get some really interesting glitchy cinematic results depending on the source. Very spacey. All right, so I just added that whispering back in, just to hear how crazy this can get with a little bit of effects. Now I've switched out that whispering sample in the sample slot for Square Driver, which is a sample that's really good as a sort of like traditional synth bass to go along with your crazy grain stuff. Let's talk about LFOs and modulation. There's a mod matrix down here that you can send the LFOs and stuff to, and then it will create sums of them. So that's pretty dope. So there's the LFO amount going in there. And LFO2, and you can see that that summing bus is creating a new signal. So there's LFOs directly, 2 buses, and then the summing bus, and then the shaper for modulation. And when you start assigning stuff to like grains and how grains work, you can get just wild stuff. Pharlight is very, very capable of creating extremely cinematic sounds, just like its friend Straylight, which came before this. But it's also really good at making interesting lead and bass sounds. And that's what I did for my demo. I'm going to play that for you next. All the sounds that you're going to hear from it are from Pharlight, except for the drums. Let's listen to some demos. First off, Machine. I started the whole thing in Machine because I wanted to challenge myself to learn the software and ecosystem. Again, everything going on here except for the drums is Pharlight. After I had something good in Machine, I took it over to Ableton. You can see all my stems here that I exported from Machine, and then I added a ton more stuff. Again, everything but the drums is Pharlight. So this is the track that you can remix if you want as part of the contest that's being held on Metapop. Metapop is about helping music makers get inspired, learn, share, and connect. And it's really community focused because people comment on each other's stuff and everyone tries to help everyone. They have big artists, small artists. It seems like a really, really cool place. So I'll be over there talking with you during this process about these remixes. You'll get all the audio stems for this, and you can use Pharlight and the stems to make a new track. I think it'll be fun. Head on over to Metapop to check out the contest details. So that's Pharlight, and that's the track, and that's the contest. I hope to see you over there. I'm really excited to hear what y'all do. My name is Jeremy. This is Red Beans Recording, and I hope you have a wonderful day.